So, welcome everyone. We have a great KVA in store for you guys today, so I hope you guys enjoy it. In today's KVA, like Christina said, we are going to be diving into the new finish tool that Inventor has to offer in the new version, which is 2024. So here's a little bit of an agenda that we're going to be going over today. We're going to go over a little bit of an introduction of myself. We'll get into a little overview about the tool. I have a poll question that I want to ask you guys. And then we'll get into the demo, which is we're going to start using the finish tool, and I'll explain everything along the way. And as well as we're going to start talking about some model states and how that plays with finishing, as well as the parameters and iLogics that are tied to it. And as I go through this whole entire demo, I want to share some tips and tricks that I found while I was using the tool. At the very end, we'll go over Q&A. But if you guys have any questions along the way, feel free to type them in the chat, and we'll stop periodically to make sure that we get those questions answered sooner rather than later. Right. So a little introduction about myself. I'm an application engineer here at KETIV. Been here at KETIV for almost 5 years now. Started off as a content creator. So anything from quick tip videos, KVAs, as well as Inventor content. So 3D models, assemblies, drawings, you name it. Slowly started moving towards automation. So I've done a lot of iLogic within Inventor, and now I am becoming a developer. So doing a lot of development work with Inventor to do 3D automation. A little bit about my background as well. When it comes to education is I graduated from Cal Poly Pomona with a mechanical engineering degree. So let's go ahead and talk about the finish tool. What is it? The finish tool, like I said, is new to Inventor 2024. It's something that we haven't seen before. You can see this in any Inventor environment besides drawing. So you'll see it in parts, assembly, sheet metal, weldments. All that's going to be there. And what's the purpose of the tool? It's to give different finishes to different faces of your part or your assembly. Some things that you're going to notice is when you create new finishes, it automatically gets paired with some new parameters that are unique specifically to that finish. And how you control that is you'll create model states for every finish. And I'll go more into depth about what that really means. All right, so why finish tool? What's the purpose about it? Why did Autodesk really implement this in the first place? Really, the main thing is to organize the entire manufacturing process under a single part or assembly. So you can follow the entire lifespan of a part from the initial creation of it all the way to the finished product that the customer ends up getting. The benefit about that is that higher organization, your parts and assemblies are going to be a lot more intelligent. Another thing you're going to notice is that your parts are going to be a better representation of what it is. So you're not having to notate in the drawings only saying like, hey, this is what the finished product is. You're going to be able to see that in the 3D model. Another thing that is going to be very beneficial is that you're going to be able to notate a better tolerance stack up. So you're going to notice with some of the features within the finish tool is that you can dictate thickness of finishes, which helps give a better accurate representation of how things stack up when it comes to values at the end. All right. Next slide is my poll question. So Christina, if you could put up the poll, please. All right. So this poll mainly is I'm trying to get a gauge of what you guys are going to be using this finish tool for. Is it going to be for metal parts and assembly specifically? Maybe you're working with wood. Is it plastic, all the above, or other? And if you do end up choosing other, go ahead and start typing in the chat. What are some other things that you are expecting to see out of it? So I'll give you guys a couple minutes to go ahead and answer that. So I see we have the results here. A big group of you guys are saying that you guys were going to use it with metal parts. That's great. The next big one, actually, it's actually tied between wood and plastic, but the majority of you guys are saying metal parts, which is great. Wood and plastic, I will go into a little bit about that as well. So thank you for voting on that. I am going to go to the next slide, which I believe is my demo. All right, so I have closed out the PowerPoint for now, and I have Inventor on the screen. So I have a simple part here. I just call it a shaft, and it has a spline count at the top. You're going to see in my model browser, under model states, I don't have anything. Solid bodies, I have 2. I have the bottom shaft as well as the spline on the top. And then I have some model features in there. If I go ahead and open up my parameters, you're going to see that I have some model parameters pertaining to my shaft itself, as well as some user parameters that I have to configure the model. So first things first, you're going to be able to find the finish tool. If you're in a part under 3D model, you're going to go to the modify panel, and under there, you're going to see a tool that says finish. It has a rainbow square next to it. If you press that, you're going to get a dialog that pops up here. If you're in the assembly environment, it's a lot easier to see it. If you're in the assemble tab, you're going to have a whole entire panel called finish. And there's only one button in there, and it's the same user interface. So the tool works exactly the same in both the part as well as the assembly. All right, so for this example, I'm going to be working in the part. So if I go ahead and open up the finish tool, first thing you're going to have to select our faces, and based off the faces you select, it's automatically going to calculate the area that you need, or the area that you've selected. Under there, you have 5 options for type. You could do appearances only. You have a material coating. You have heat treatment options, surface texture, as well as a paint option. One cool thing I saw on the side over here is they give you the option on how you want this to look. You can have it as icons, or you can have it as a drop down. You have drop downs, it actually labels it right next to it. So let's go ahead and work in here. And if you actually want to switch back down here under selector style, you can press icons and it'll switch it back like that. So for me, I'm just going to do drop down. I like the way it looks, and it has all the names, so it's going to be easier for you guys to see. So I'm just going to select a random face here. So right now we're under appearance, so it just gave it a default appearance from your appearance library. And let's just say I want to switch it to, I have it as heat treating right here. Actually, let's go through all of them. So the first one's appearance. Literally, like I said, this is just your appearance library, so you can select anything that you want in there. With every option that you have, you could put a comment. So whether you want to put a comment of which manufacturer you're sending this to get this treatment applied, or maybe you guys do it in-house, you could say what machine that this part's going to go to. Under material coating, you have a few options here. You have this zinc coating. You have this other zinc coating, which is more of that gold zinc that you see, and it has a little bit of that purple shade in it. And you also have this zinc nickel plating. So those are the 3 options that are native, that come default out of the box. You're also going to see powder coating in here, which is something I made custom, and we'll go a little bit more into depth about that in a little bit. So the next option you have is heat treatment. You have a bunch of default processes here. You can do the appearances on this again. You can enter a description if the default's not good enough for you. And a new unit that Inventor has introduced is hardness. So the hardnesses that the finish tool accepts right now are the Rockwell, Burnell, as well as the Vickers. So you're going to see if I have HRC, you have an option to do HB, which is the Brinell scale. But those are the 3 acceptable hardnesses. And you're going to see in heat treating, you have another value in here that's called depth. You're able to specify how deep that hardness needs to be, which is a really neat field. So under surface texture, you're going to see that this is another finishing tool, and this is all pretty much subtractive options that you have. So grinding, honing, lapping, polishing, super finishing. You could select the finishing or the appearance based off of that the process that you choose, and then description and comment as well. The last one is going to be paint. Paint comes out of the box with 3 options. So you have RAL 3018, 2008, 6003. And if you guys are not familiar with RAL or RAL, what it is it's a standardized paint coloring batching system. And it's German. I'm not going to say it because I'm gonna butcher it, but that's the default for it. And I'll tell you guys 3018 is a strawberry red, 2008 is a bright red orange, and then 6003 is the option for olive green. So you can see if I select it, that's the green, that they call this one a red orange, and then this one is a strawberry red. And those are just what comes out the box specifically with these paint options. All right. So let's go ahead and apply some finishes here. So I'm just going to stick with the paint. I chose this 3018, which is a strawberry red. I want the paint to be a thickness of 50 microns, so really tiny. And then my comment, I might say sent to machine A for paint. Something that makes sense so you guys can track it. So now I press OK. You're going to see the second I press OK, there's a new folder over here that says finishes in the model browser. If I drop down, it's called finish 2. Under model states, nothing has changed. You're still in the primary model states. If I go ahead and open up my parameters list, at this point, you're going to see pretty much every field that was in the finish tool is now inside the parameters list. So everything from the area that was selected, the appearance name, my comment in there, my description, the process, which was default, description, short description, and then as well as the thickness. And you're going to see in the nominal, it translates the nominal to inches right here. All right. I see the chat panel is kind of blowing up right now. So let me see if I can answer some of these questions. Would you prefer questions in the chat window or the question window? Either or, it doesn't matter to me. Another one I have, we paint many of our products, and figuring out painted surface area allows us to calculate how much primary paint we will need, as well as the products such as sandblast media. Question is, will this give us the surface area to be painted? Yes. So if I go ahead and open it, the area, the whole reason for this is so you can really calculate how much material you're going to be using. So you could predict in advance how much material you have to order, as well as you can accurately track where it's going to be going to. So that's really the main purpose of that. Also, if you send this out to do it by a third-party manufacturer that either does your painting, you could expect a good price point on where to pay, because they're not going to overcharge you, because you know exactly how much you're going to be using. So I see another question here. Can you configure the output finish notes on a drawing in heat, for example, in heat treat field 55 Hardwell? Yes, so you can customize those hardnesses. So let's go ahead, let's do another one. So let's do heat treating. Typically, what you would do is you would heat treat splines. just so you know that they're going to be super strong. So in here, you're going to see that it's going to actually select faces. And if you go in here, I can manually go ahead and select all these faces, but you might be selecting for days. So what I noticed is that you can't select, for example, solids. So what I would do is if I go finish, if I want to select all these splines, you could left click, drag to the bottom right hand corner, and it'll pick up all of those faces for you. That'll be the fastest way to do that. So that's a little tip that I figured out. If I go over to heat treating, you have these default options here. So just say I want to do case hardening for 55 Rockwell, which is Rockwell, which is what someone was asking for. I have that option in there. I could select the appearance that goes in hand with that. Maybe I just want to represent it as generic, or maybe I want to show it as gold. So I know maybe that's what I could tell my manufacturer that that's our coloring standard. I could specify the depth that I want that hardness to be. So maybe the tolerance I have to be at least a 4mm depth for hardness. And then put a comment in there that's useful for you. You don't even have to. At this point, you could press OK. And now a hardness is applied here. Under my finishes, you're going to have a new finish. And the nice thing is it shows you the icon that that finish is associated with. Now, if I go ahead and open up my parameters, I'm going to have additional finish parameters in here that deal specifically with that hardening of those splines. And you're going to see that I didn't put a comment in there. So this parameter came back as blank. But if I choose to put one in now, so sent to manufacturer, to manufacturer B, or hardening. Like that, I have a comment in there now. If I go back into that finish and do an edit of it, you're going to see that it automatically populated that field. And here you have the hardness here. You could actually specify like, well, maybe I didn't want it as a Rockwell. I could specify as a Brunel. Maybe I didn't want it as 55 because the option is 55 plus. Maybe I actually want it as 60. We'll select the 55 plus or minus here, but actually the hardness is going to be 60. And that, since it's a parameter, you're actually able to access it in the drawing. So I also see a question about anodizing. So let's go ahead and do a different finish. Maybe after you harden this, you want to anodize it. Who knows? You're allowed to do multiple finishes on parts that have been finished before. So here, anodizing, material coating. If you go in here, there isn't an option for anodizing. So let's talk about how I even got powder coating to begin with. So powder coating, I have it as default as red. Maybe I didn't want it as red. I'll switch it to, let's see, a different color. Let's do silver. I'll go ahead and do a different description. Maybe there's a different RAL code for silver. So we'll put that information in. I'm just going to put it as numbers because I don't know it off the top of my head. And we'll just call it silver. Short description, we'll call it silver powder coating because that's the option. And the thickness of that is going to be, let's say, 20 microns. And you're going to see that I spelled microns wrong because I put an S, so it didn't like it. And I'm just going to put a comment in there. Pressed OK, and you're going to see it work. You might be asking me, hey, Justin, how did you even get powder coating in there? Because that doesn't come out of the box like that. Well, how you get to that is through this file path. So if I go ahead and open up a file explorer, I'm going to expand this guy right here. And this is the file path that you're going to see. See users, public documents, Autodesk Inventor 2024, design data, XML, en-us. Once you put in that file path, it's going to take you to this finished XML, which is tied directly to Inventors. So if I go ahead and do a right click and edit with Notepad, so actually let me talk about that. I like to edit with Notepad++, just because when I open it up, it looks like this, and this is a lot easier to read than opening it up in a lot of different places. One thing I saw when I was trying to edit this was that it gives you the option to open it with Excel, which is cool. You open it with Excel, you press OK. It creates it in this table right here, which is super, super nice to see. But when I was starting to make edits in here and started adding rows for these finishes, when I tried to save it as an XML or export it out as an XML, it did not come back out in an acceptable way that Inventor can understand it. So what I did was, like I said, I did Notepad++ to edit it. I like this. There's another one that does it in dark mode. I forgot what the name of it is off the top of my head. And you're going to see in here at the very top under material coding, I have powder coating in there. If I wanted to, the best and easiest way to make edits is if you copy this, place it right below if it's under material coding. You're going to see that I didn't format it correctly, so just be aware of that. I brought it back out to make sure that the formatting looks correct so it's easier to read. And maybe instead of powder coating, we're going to do it as anodizing. So you could put it in there, you could specify the color, make sure anywhere that says powder coating, because I copied it from above, that it doesn't say powder coating anymore. So I'm going to copy anodizing and put it in there, put it in there. And then here you could also give it a default thickness. This is the best way to go in there and edit it. Unfortunately, right now it's just manual edits until you write a script and you can start making a bunch of different default information in there. So once you finish up with this, go ahead and save it. One thing I do recommend is that you make edits while Inventor is closed. So once you open up Inventor, you're going to have that fresh version of it. So just because of that, I'm not going to make any saves to this file that I just did, but that will be the steps that you take in order to add different finishes. So you could do it under heat treatment, you could do it under material coatings, and you could specify those by the types. The types represent the 5 categories that they have in there. So you have 1 here, you have 2 here. Type 3 is surface texture, type 4 is paint. And now you're going to be like, hey, Justin, you said that there are 5 options for finishes. Yes, these only cover the 4. The last one that we went over was actually the first one in this list, which is appearances. If you want to make edits to appearances, what you would do is not make edits to the XML specifically, but you would actually make changes to your appearance library. So I went up here and pressed this rainbow circle. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to choose the default one. I'm going to right click, and there's going to be an edit option. Actually, sorry, not edit. I apologize. It's not going to be edit. It's going to be duplicate. So I'm just going to duplicate it from the default, and then I'm just going to name it custom 1. So the second you created one, even though this is based off the default, if I go over to my finishes and go into my appearances, and I scroll down and I scroll up actually because it's in alphabetical order, you're going to see you have custom 1 there as your option. All right. Let's see if there's any additional questions at this point. So will selecting type 2 or type 3 anodize automatically add the finish thickness? Yeah, so finish thickness, like I said, comes up as default. So whatever you have in that XML, that's what it's going to come out as. But you can always override it to make it the thickness that you want. And like whenever you make those changes, like in here, we have that finish for powder coating. I have it as 20 microns. So like I said, if I move it up to 50 micron, press OK. So in here, you're going to see that that finish is now 50 micron. And just for the sake of it, what I saw is like I could put in something super absurd. I could put in something like 10-inch thickness for finishes. Press OK. It's going to accept it, and you're going to notice that the model doesn't change at all. It's not. These finishes do not make any parameter model changes or any value changes. All that value is just pretty much metadata that's specifically unique for this part. So just because you have, I believe I have a 0.75 inch diameter shaft here, and I put in a 10-inch finish, it's not going to make it a 10.75 inch shaft just because I have 10-inch of finishing on there. That all comes into the tolerance stack up that you guys assign to it, and that's how you're going to determine what that what is an acceptable tolerance after all the finishes are applied. So I use two computers and would want to be able to copy the modified edited file to both machines. What files would need to be synced? Yeah. So that file would be finish XML, and I highly recommend the second that you make any changes to an XML that's default in Inventor, go ahead and put that in Vault. Check it into Vault. Let the CAD admin handle that, as so you can always get the right file. Make sure it's up to date. Everyone in your company has access to it, and then make sure your project file is mapped to this finished XML, so it's always getting the latest and greatest. And then that way, when people make edits when they're not supposed to, you can always get the copy from Vault, and that's where the living document is going to be. All right. So that's what I have here. So let's go back to the when I did the splines up here. The first finish I did was a heat treating, and then the second thing I did was a powder coat. Let me switch it back to powder coat. And let's not make it red, so it's confusing. Let's make it rubber black for now. And we're going to keep it as 10 microns. So in your finish right here, you're going to see that it puts it in order from finish 2, 3, and 4. It's very important that what this ordering is, because it orders it in the way that it's going down the manufacturing line. So that means, hey, we're going to paint the shaft first, going to heat treat the spline, and then after that, we're going to powder coat the spline. And that's the manufacturing order that it's going to go in. If you put it in a different order, just say, hey, actually, the heat treat has to go first, and then at that point, you could paint and powder coat. Make sure that it's in that order. And like I just did right there, you could drag them up and down to put them in the correct order. But make sure that this is very important that you do it in the correct order. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the parameter list that you have in here. You are able to export these parameters, which is something new to Inventor 2024 that I wanted to cover today as well. The second that you press export, so just say you wanted to export the area just so you know the amount of material that you needed for all these finishing process. So right here, I exported all those parameters. If I go and right click on my part and go to my eye properties, under custom, you're going to see that those values are there. And you are now able to use this in drawings. But you're also able to access all these other texts and drawings as well as little notes as prompted entries. All right. So going back into the finish tool, you guys might have noticed that a lot of these, when it comes to material coding, comes to heat treatment, as well as surface textures, that a lot of this information applies specifically to metalworking. And when I asked you guys that poll question earlier today, a lot of you guys said, yes, we're using this specifically for metalworking. How about woodworking? Maybe you guys want to show veneering, for example. Veneering is a great example for wood. How would I show that? best thing to do is select which category you want to apply it under. So whether it be surface texture, heat treatment, or material coating. In my opinion, I would put that under surface texture, and then I would make the edits to that XML to add those finishes in. The only thing that you're not going to notice is that when you do add veneering, you're going to add a material thickness to that. So maybe repurpose the comment field as a thickness. So you can say, hey, this veneer that we're using is going to be X thick. And that's the best way that you're going to be able to use this for woodworking. And this also applies for plastics as well. You could apply it there, or you could also put it as a material coating where you also get that thickness field by default. All right. So now let's get into the part where we're starting to use model states. So right here is my primary model states. Let's just say I want all my finishes to be suppressed. So I'm gonna right click and suppress those models, those finishes in the primary model state. What I would like is in my first model state, I'm gonna create a new one. And then in this one, I just want to have my splines hardened. I'll go ahead and switch back to the primary one at this point. And I want to rename this model state so I understand what it is. So I'm just going to put hardening because that's what that step is. Now go back to the primary, and then I'll create a new one. Now it's model state 1. You're already selected in that. At that point, I want the hardening to take place as well. The next step I want is to unsuppress this because I want the shaft to be painted. Select outside of the that model state. So I'm gonna go back to primary, and then I'm going to rename that model state to painting. So just rename it to something that makes sense. And last step, I am going to create a new model state. And the final one is it's going to have all 3 of these unsuppressed. So at this point, you're going to have, we did the hardening, we did the painting, and then now we're going to do the powder coating. So now you're able to control each manufacturing step with the model state. So hardening, hardening with the paint, hardening, painting, and powder coating. Those are the steps right there. So next, let's go ahead and jump into a little bit of the iLogic a bit. So right here, I have a rule that's called spline count. This is mainly specifically for the part itself. So when it changes, the splines change. So it's just a model configuration. Let's go ahead and create a new rule. And let's call this the finishing rule. So when we're in this rule, you're going to see in this window right here that you have access to the model parameters, which you've always had access to, user parameters, which you also always had access to. And the last one is going to be finish parameters, which is new. When you are in here, it only gives you the finished ones when you select the finish. So in here, you can actually do select cases or if statements to control it. So let's say finish 3 depth. I'm gonna capture that statement. Currently it's at 4 millimeters. Let's just say if my user parameter, which is diameter, let's say if diameter equals 1.5 inch, then finish depth is going to have to be larger for some reason. Let's put 10 millimeters. Else, I want my finish depth to be 5 millimeter. And if. So you can actually write those values, save and run. So if I'm in here, my diameter is 0.75. If I make it 1.5 inch, it's going to configure that model. You're going to see that it changed. You're going to see now my finish 3. Finish 3 depth is that 0.393, which is actually that 10 microns. If I go ahead and put in here 10 micron, I could do it. Nope, it just defaults it to that. But 10 micron translates over to that. So you're able to use those parameters to control. You use iLogic to control those parameters with your configuration. One thing that I noticed was there isn't actually any API to directly suppress and unsuppress the finish. So when I type in here in the snippets, I don't see it in there. As well as this is my model browser. I don't see finishes under there. Even though I have these model states, I don't see the finishing under that. So the whole purpose of having the model states is actually you can capture those statements and actually write to those model states. And that's the best way to access that if you want to use iLogic to control your configurations. All right, so let's go ahead and jump over to drawings, for example. Let me go ahead and fix this guy like that. And let's go ahead and create a drawing of this. If I create it, give it a second for Inventor to think right here. All right, I'm here. Give it a couple of views to base. Nice. So when I'm in here, if I go into annotate and then I do text, I selected a text box in there. You can see right here it says shaft powder coating because you have options for model parameters, finish parameters, user parameters. So if I select finish, you have all these parameters that you can put in there. So if I select this, I can press this right here to drop it down, and I can format it, say, hey, I actually also want the area that needs to be used, put it in there, so on and so forth. So put it in there, and now it's attached to my drawings as a text. Very, very useful. You're also going to be, if you put it as an iProperty, you're able to call out on it and then put it in your title block. All right, and this applies all to the assembly as well. It doesn't work any different whether you're in the sheet metal environment, weldment environment, or the assembly environment. All the same exact steps to follow. All right. Let's see what else we wanted to talk about. Oh, last thing actually, one thing I did want to mention. If you are planning to make edits to this finish XML, make sure that you right click on it and check the properties and make sure that read only isn't checked. If it's read only, you're not going to be able to make any changes. If you press uncheck that and you press apply, go ahead and apply changes. Now you're going to be able to make changes to that. And again, what I used to make changes was called Notepad++. You could download that off the internet. It's 100% free. That's what I like to use. There are other XML editors that you could use, but what I used in my example today was Notepad++. All right. That's all I had. Let me go back to my presentation. And here's a little bit of contact information if you have any questions for me. My email is justin.gao@ketiv.com. That's my number on the screen. If you want to connect, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well if you have any questions, or call or email, whatever it is, feel free. I'm available for you guys. So I have that on the screen. The last thing I wanted was to go over the Q&A. So if there are any questions, feel free to ask now. I do see there's some stuff in here. So Mario, Vault 2024 automatically pushes design data if mapped correctly. Yep, exactly. Thank you for that, Mario. Brian Kelly also says, hey, make a backup of the XML file first. Very true. If you put it into Vault at the very beginning, you're always going to have that original file in there. We always recommend whenever you're making changes to any design data, put it in Vault. Let Vault control that. That's the whole purpose of that tool. I see a question here. Is it necessary to jump back to the primary model state before changing the name of the other states? Yeah, so actually, if you are in Inventor and you're in a model state, so right now I'm in the hardening model state. Actually, I'm able to change the names. Sometimes I had the issue that the names weren't changing. So yeah, you're actually able to change the names if you're in that model state. But when I switch back and forth, I always like to switch back to primary when I'm suppressing and unsuppressing it. Because if I start here and I make a copy of it, this is with nothing, and I like to turn things on manually that way. That way, sometimes if you start in a model state and you create a model state of that model state, sometimes it gets a little bit confused. And especially if you made changes that you didn't mean to keep in there, you do run into some issues later down the road. But yeah, to answer your question, no, you don't have to switch back and forth to name the model states. All right, I have no more open questions, but I will go ahead and end my presentation there. Here's my contact information once again. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We have a great support team. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to them. But yeah, I'll stay on for a couple more minutes if any last minute questions come up. But thank you for being part of the presentation today, guys.